Welcome back to Into the Depths, but you might notice there's something a little different for this episode. And if you're not quite sure what that is, we are now on video.
If you're not listening to us on YouTube, which we don't have a channel up yet, which we will, this is our first video. But we're still on Castbox, so if you guys want to, check us out, and we will be dropping this link with the YouTube video. So what's up, guys? Welcome back. Things are changing for us. We've been out of the game for a while, and
figuring things out, changing things up, having our own life go on. But one thing I can say right off the bat is it's going to be hard for me to shift my view from either the microphone or the laptop to the camera, to the people. Hi guys, sorry we're new at this. Yeah, we're complete amateurs at this junction in the game. But
welcome to our apartment for one. This is the new place we got.
It's not an apartment; it's a townhouse. I get. Okay. It's like calling a fine escort a prostitute, and I have gumption. I take gumption with that.
Okay, and I agree with that. That makes sense. But welcome anyways to our home. If you guys are new to this as much as we are, we want to talk about so much, but real quick, just want to say that we have a bunch of new style of what we're doing, and we will be dropping about 5 damn episodes
into your laps.
And it's just going to be us doing this now, more like a radio station. It's hard to keep doing the work that we've been doing, which we will here periodically be doing what we used to do. But for now, we just want to change things up, have you guys see what we normally are like. By the way, isn't he fucking sexy?
No, this guy. Yeah, and I'm sorry, actually, if you are unimpressed or let down by what we look like. That's not our fault, that's yours.
That's on you, yeah.
Yeah, so either get over it or change the channel, really.
We get to do this how we want to do it, and I'll tell you one thing right now. He's doing this in his famous Adventure Time Jake. Yeah, if you can...
Jake Jammies. Yeah, that's how we do. And my super ugly fucking sandals. Yeah, these things are just atrocious, but I like them, so...
Also, we have beer here, and we're not going to show you what they are as much as possible, but...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, if you see it, just realize, not a sponsor, but...
Hey, Stone Brewery,
It could be. Anyway, so to get to the point, we mentioned that we are doing something a little different these days from what we used to do. I don't know how many of you have been following us since day one or been picking up, along the way. But we used to really put a lot of effort into making these stories and crafting worlds and trying to tackle hypothetical situations and questions by giving the most pronounced examples we could. And that was fun. It was good time. We had a lot of creative hurdles to work through, but
it didn't show who we were fully, though.
Yeah,
this kind of helps with that. So.
And I think that's why we've opted for this sort of scenario, because it all came from just us talking in the first place, just us hanging out late night, having beers, and talking about weird shit. And I think this is the best course of action because this is who we are. This is how this started, and this is what we do.
And then to expand upon that, since that's how it started, it went to us doing a podcast together. As most of you guys know who have listened to it, thank you again to those newbies.
Thank you.
We went from, what, fuck it, why don't we record? And then it turned into, why are we not expanding and doing video? And so we finally saved up some money. We tried to do a Kickstarter, which we might try to do again because this takes a lot of money out of our own pockets, but we still want to do it no matter what because it's what we love and this is our favorite thing to do together.
Yeah, and hey, if you have some money and you have a spirit to donate to some people who really are trying to manifest their own dream, and you like us, and any or all of those things, hey, next time we come around with a please give us money situation, we mean it. We will use the money to better this program. We will use the money to better ourselves and to be better prepared for things. So
we just want to make a better quality video and also, podcast all around. So
yeah.
We're trying to make it, and we know that other people are trying to make it themselves. And if you have a charity or something that you want us to help with or donate and get it out there and recognized,
oh hell yeah, we'll give back.
Send that to us.
We will give back.
And the best thing before we get started, I want to say is I have facial tics, which you can't see because I did a podcast for so long. So if I'm winking at the camera, it either will be me winking at you, or we'll fucking leave you in suspense and you won't be able to tell, I guess. But hey, well, let's give them reason to keep on listening.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk about kind of scary stories, let alone true stories that we've experienced.
Yes, I want to put an emphasis on true stories, because we had a night a few weeks back where we were stuck in the dark, and that's all we had really was telling stories to each other. And what came about was that, hey, we've had some really weird experiences, and let's do an episode about it. So these are our experiences, not exaggerated, not blown up, not changed, not made up. This is what we've been through and what we think and what we see and yada yada yada. And we think they're interesting, and we hope you do too.
Also, real quick, we have 2 full-time jobs. We pay our PG&E, but PG&E, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
If you live in California, you know what we're talking
bitch.
about. Northern California. You know what we're fucking talking about. And I want to throw that out real quick, because tomorrow we won't have any power for 2 to 3 days, possibly.
Yeah, so
fuck you, PG&E.
We're gonna just live in the moment right now.
But yeah,
if I see a PG&E rep, I'm gonna kick him in the balls, and then tell him why. But because I'm kicking somebody in the balls without knowing why, it's just that's a crime.
Because you know what, we're still gonna record an episode. That next one probably won't be on video, but we're gonna do it anyways because we'll be bored and we'll be sitting in the dark. And it's what created this episode. So Anton, I want you to tell everybody the story you told me about the apparition at your friend's house.
Oh, okay.
I love this story.
So I just want to be on the same wavelength here.
Oh, that's correct. You had a few.
There was the apparition. Yeah. Okay.
Through the glass.
Okay.
Through the looking glass, in a sense, but.
So the way this goes was I had a friend for a number of years. We've since grown apart. That has nothing to do with the story, but he had these feelings and he felt these things in his home. And I'd been over to his house multiple times, spent the night, whatever, played video games till the dawn, whatever. And I was like, oh man, that's really interesting, because there are a few parts of your house that do feel a little weird. And he's like, yeah, you've told me some things that made me want to tell you, and so, okay, I know there's a ghost living in my house. And we spent a good chunk of time just that night kind of exploring the house and trying different things. And at one point in his sliding glass door, I could see this culmination of shadow and light that didn't make any sense, and it sort of moved and it sort of hovered, and I was like, bro, can you see this? 'Cause bro. And at first he was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about, and I kind of shook him and pulled him over to where I was standing, and then he's like, what is that? And I don't know if it was just vibes or I'm not really into this hippy dippy bullshit, but
there's a feeling of empathic relationship.
Yes,
we understand magnetic feelings. We also understand
Yes.
that there's something in the air, is what most people say.
Something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Sorry. Yeah, we could.
But yeah, and like I just started getting feelings and like almost like words coming to me. What I told my friend was this. Yes, this is a ghost. This is an apparition. It has a conscious state, and its name is Bob. Not a great name for a ghost, I'll give you that. But
I don't know why. That's what rings it true for me though. It's because like it's not like Annalise Meredith. You know, it's not some creepy name.
Theodore Blackwell.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it was Bob.
Yeah,
and it was one name, Bob. And he was like trying to communicate. He wasn't, malicious or malevolent. He wasn't really trying to do much other than to be noticed. Because he's like, I'm stuck in this shit house. It was a shit house, by the way. It was riddled with bullshit. And we spent like sort of an hour or so like getting to try to like seance this fucking apparition. We're kids. I was probably like 15. Less, maybe 14, 13. I don't know. But and I tried to ask him questions. I was like, how did you die? And he's like, it was an accident. And I was like, okay. And then, who were you? And he didn't answer. And, is there any family that you should know about, that we should know about, that we can contact? And he said nothing. And like he would only answer specific questions. And then the light and the shiftiness in the sliding glass door sort of just disappeared. And it was a weird experience, but it was one of those, like, okay, that happened. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, but it was like sort of evidence that some shit happened.
Yeah.
And Brandon, you told me some pretty awesome stories too, and I'm really trying to get some traction here.
It's okay,
on which
I
one
got
I
one.
want.
Oh, which one do you want?
Which one I want. Let's start slow and build up, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one that I remember telling you that was a little kind of like that. It was nothing malicious. It wasn't something that was like a bad, like, oh my goodness, this is an evil spirit, blah blah blah, whatever you want to have it. But real quick, I want to say, since this is our first video, I feel like Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah, you knew exactly what I'm like,
just put them down.
Yeah, as you guys can probably see, I'm sitting there like, yeah, what? Do I look at the camera the whole time creepily? Like, what do I do? But, not to kill the mood, it's just, but.
Oh no, the mood is there. The mood is there.
Well, alright, so my story starts with me, my older sister, and my older brother. Me and my older brother used to share a room.
And I know which one this is. Okay, yeah. This is the one I actually wanted you to start with.
This one's great. It's a little bit weird. So, me and my older brother shared a room together, bunk bed status, you know how it goes. My sister was in the other room, and she would sneak into our room on school nights, and we would have our light on, and we'd all sit there and talk, play board games, and do stuff, stay up stupid late. And our parents' door, which was like across the house, not a very big house, it was a mobile home. And so they were across, but our door was so bad. It was like one of those doors that like needs to be shaved. Like it had that whole like,
yeah,
it like pops open. Like you
like
can hear it.
Not even some WD-40 could help that shit. It's just
warped. The wood's warped, and you gotta fix the whole door, or at least whatever. So we could always tell my dad would open the door, and he could hear us sometimes giggling, laughing, and he would like, hear that, and then he would come and be like, "You guys need to go to bed." And we'd all pretend to be asleep, obviously. And he's like, "You think I'm stupid?" So we got into our heads of being like, all right, we gotta be careful. Dad coming out, right? But we had a family room and a living room between us. And so one night we were sitting there. My older brother was wearing a white shirt, one of those tall tees that happened in the early 2000s that everyone wore. So you could see it. It was,
back, man.
but it was a tall tee, so it went like down to your knees almost. And we were all sitting there. I think we were talking about stuff and telling stories and just kind of bouncing back and forth on each other. And then, not in a bad way, I meant stories.
Nah.
But so we were sitting there and we just hear a and my brother jumps up because he was close to the door and he just switches off the lights and he's standing by the door and we were listening and I just hear him go, I'm gonna go check. And my sister kind of sits by the bed. I'm up on top, so I kind of like roll over and close my eyes like, oh, I'm all ready for this, fall asleep, fake sleeping game. So I'm already got my eyes closed. And then my older brother goes to go check, and he's sitting there. And then we can't see him anymore because it's dark in the living room, family room. And we can see him move though, and he goes away from the door. So we're like, okay, what's going on? And because we also have dogs and all that, so we weren't sure if it was just one of the dogs or anything, like cats. And then
the chickens, the ocelots,
right?
The badgers.
That'd be awesome. So I kind of slightly like open my eyes, just a little slit, my eyes, like kind of opening it, you're squinting, and you see this white figure form in front of the door. And my sister is staring at him, and I can see my sister, and she's looking at him like, what is it? But she doesn't say anything. Later on, she goes to say she felt like she wanted to say something, but she was kind of paralyzed in a weird way and didn't want to say anything. So she wanted to wait, and just in case my dad was around the corner.
I just want to say that paralyzed feeling is not uncommon.
No.
That is something that I've experienced. It's something that I've heard a lot of other people experience, and that's my interjection.
I have felt that feeling before too, but at this moment I didn't, and we waited like 30 seconds, which felt like forever, and I finally said, to my older brother, and doesn't say anything. He just moves towards his bed and sits down near my sister, and my sister starts like moving away from him, and I was like, Nick, what is that there? And all of a sudden the lights come back on and my brother's standing at the front of and my sister just screams. She's in tears. She runs to my parents' room, who are there dead asleep, and she starts screaming and she's terrified and tells them what happened. My dad, who does actually believe in ghosts, even being a huge Christian, but he was like, everything else is fake.
Okay.
But
can we just take a second to relay like your dad's perspective on like aliens and ghosts real quick?
Yeah, so, when I was a kid though, he used to tell us it's all fake. And that's what was so amazing to me when he finally did tell me one day, me and him were sitting down, and he told me, he was like, well, I do believe in God, but I believe that God had 7 days to create the earth. What do you think he's been doing since then? And I've always loved that explanation.
Right.
But he always, as we were kids, he always illuminated like he didn't believe any of that shit. It was nonsense. But I think it was more or less like to not
protecting himself,
the kids, and like now it's all fantasy. Grow up. But they, like, my sister could not. She had to sleep in their bed that night. She was fucking horrified, and she told us later. She's like, I couldn't say anything. I was paralyzed. But I remember the fear I had, which was seeing it, and then the light turns on, and I turn my head, like, almost like fucking, all the way to the right, staring straight down to all the way to the right. My brother's standing there saying, it's good. And she just screams bloody murder. And I was like, what the fuck?
What exactly did you see?
It was like, it looked like my brother with his white tall tee standing at the door frame. And it
Even
moved
though
slowly.
it wasn't him.
Yeah, and it moved slowly towards the bed, and he sat down on the bed as we saw it. But then, about 10 feet away, he's at the door turning the light on saying that wasn't him. And my sister screamed because it was right next to her.
Man, that's nasty.
Dude, right?
That is nasty.
It was horror because you were confused. It was like what the fuck just happened? Because there's no way. But it was like yeah, it was a really trippy.
Yeah, it's almost better the second time around, by the way, I just gotta tell you.
We gotta perform.
But okay.
But it still sets in a little bit where it's kind of like the imagination of, or the imaging of, you were staring at something straight ahead at you, and then you have to go, that's there, that's real, right? And then
you have to question your senses you have to question your senses. It's like, was that a trick of the imagination? And no. A lot of the time, no.
I don't think it was. And the thing that's creepy is because you sit there and then you're staring at your supposedly brother, and then the light turns on, and the first thing you think is, oh shit, Dad. Then you see your brother there, and that's when you're like, what the fuck was that though? And it was clear as day.
You can't be in two places at the same time. I know a little bit about physics.
Yeah, and at the same time too, the one thing I have to say that is notable about it is it didn't float. It bobbed like someone was walking.
Right.
No sound, which we didn't have hardwood flooring, but our fucking carpets are squeaky as shit. As a lot of people understand that. Like,
no, there's some floorboards that aren't quite right.
But no, it was just that massive confusion, and within seconds though, when I'm trying to gather what the fuck just happened, my sister screamed because she was horrified, and she probably felt something. And ever since then, she was like, I don't believe in ghosts. I was like, what about that one time? And she was like, that's why I don't want to believe in them.
Oh,
so she shuts them out.
Okay, so it's a willful ignorance.
Exactly. And I was like,
and
okay.
you know, some people have to go that route if that helps you live your life. But what I wanted to say was that as kids, we are more susceptible to these encounters.
I didn't state what age I was. I was 9. By the way, I was 9. So yes, as you're going.
And in my experience, I was maybe 13. I'm pretty sure I wasn't more than that.
I was gonna say, I think you said we were talking about it the other night during the blackout. I think you said you were 13. So.
Yeah. It was between because I hung out with this kid between the ages of like 9 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I was 13.
So somewhere in those years, though, that's still like, I've had experiences when I was in 16. Like you said, your mind is still susceptible to these things because one, you don't think it's possible, and your mind is still like. It's not the fact that you can like play tricks on your mind, because it's not like watching a horror movie at 22 years old and then being like, "Ooh, I'm scared because the dark." It's because you make that up in your mind. These kids, as a kid, you're almost like you're looking at something and you're like, "What else could it be?" Like it's right in front of me.
You keep giving me creative segues to what I want to talk about next.
Yeah.
So first of all, what I want to say is growing up as a young child, I had a big fear of the dark. Excuse me. I had a big fear of the dark, and it wasn't just like, oh, it's spooky, it's dark. I mean, like I had already watched a lot of horror movies. My parents were kind of like lax on that whole situation. And I had a very pronounced imagination from the get-go. But what I will say is that everything in the shadows until I was like mid-teens moved and had its own form. There were things dancing in the shadows, and I don't mean that lightly. I saw things that would craft themselves in certain ways and almost mess with my head on purpose. That being said, when I was a little kid, I couldn't have a window in my room because I felt such dread of something coming through my window at night. Now, whether that, destroys my credibility on certain things or not, it's just true.
Well, I mean, because I remember telling you how I do understand what you're saying. I think we did talk about that night. Is your imagination can be rampant sometimes, especially for me, it's windows, as we talked about. And I remember saying this to you as I was probably like 13 or 14, but I remember being in the room that actually was like connected to this cul-de-sac in a small neighborhood, and we already knew that there was creepy people who would walk around and all that kind of stuff. But I remember like that fear of someone looking at me through the window and all that would make me imagine things. And I remember telling you how I saw, and I remember realizing it was my imagination, but it's like someone walked by my window and went like this. And I remember going, I made that up. I know I did, or maybe not. I don't know, but there's certain things I know I can realize it's an imagination trick for myself.
There are certain sensitive things that,
yeah.
like, as a child, it's hard to tell whether it's your imagination or just seeing a glimpse of something in between.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm going to stick to, and I will talk about that further if anybody wants. But the story I really want to tell right now.
All right, yeah, and as you say it, I'm gonna real quick. Sorry, guys, I'm unprofessional, but we're trying to make sure the camera is still going. Because it's a new camera, and we are good on life. So let's hear it.
All right, the story I really want to tell is another non-malevolent, benevolent situation, and from the ages of about 3 or 4 to about 7, almost 8, almost nightly, multiple times a week. Okay, so let me just give you the scene. I slept in a bunk bed. I had a bunk bed because I wanted to sleep on the top bunk, but I mean, my sister had her own room. So I just kind of like used the bottom bunk for, other things, crafts, projects, whatever.
I used to do that. In my mind, I know people who used to do that too. Bunk beds were cool back then for some reason.
I was into it.
Yeah.
I was really into it. So I don't know. I had a lot of trouble with the dark, as I mentioned before, but at a certain point, I started getting woken up in the night, and you could pass it off as a dream or whatever, and in my family, it was passed off as a dream for a number of years. But I would see this apparition, this misty, blue-white, silky form show above me in my bed. And then I could see like a sort of a distorted face. But she told me, I'm your nanny. And nanny was not like, oh, you hire somebody to take care of your kids. No, in my family, nanny was my mother's grandmother. So she was my great-grandmother.
I love this story, by the way.
Yeah. It's crazy actually, because she would visit me a lot, and she would help me after a bad dream, or she would just want to hang out and tell me stories, and ask me about things, and just like spend time with me, because she was dead a number of years before I was born. But she was a character. She was always the same when she popped up. She was, but every time was a little different, just because she wanted to talk about something new. She wanted to ask me questions, and this was all very cute for my parents when I told them. Until I was about 6. I'm pretty sure I was about 6. And this happened again. And nanny. Okay. Oh, I do need to step back a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
I do need to step back a little bit. About maybe a year before that, my mom was getting curious about this whole situation. She's like, "Oh, these stories are really cute. I would like him to know, my grandmother, or her grandmother, my great grandmother." So she kind of took me into a room, and she was very scientific about this. She put out a number of pictures, and some were like clipped from magazines, some were like older pictures of other relatives, and then there was a picture of Nanny. To this day, I actually have no idea what her real name is, because she's always been Nanny to me.
That's how it usually goes too. You know, like for me, it's like Nana, and people have to ask me like, "Oh, what was her name?" It's like the only reason why I would know that is because it's my mom's name, Paula Kehoe Senior, and so it's like, oh, but we only call her Nana. So I understand what you mean. It's like when you're that nickname is that like, is a great.
I need to look into that actually, because I guess I've never really asked the question what was her name. She was from New York. I know that.
Well, continue, please, because
anyway,
sorry, this is, I love this story.
So
the whole time, actually, not just by you. Period.
Thank you. But so yeah, my mother put out in front of me a number of pictures of different women of varying ages and at various points in time, yada yada. Some were from magazines, some were, you know, this is my memory of it. But and you know, it was funny because she was pretty good at this. She had a couple that were definitely not who I saw, and then there were a number of ladies who looked similar. And then I was like, no, that's her, and I pointed to the picture of her, which was undoubtedly a younger picture of her, but I was like, no, that's her. And my mom was just like, okay, well, you're right, yeah, that's her.
And to reiterate too, you said she died before you were born.
Yeah,
even, so
years before I was born. She was like 80 when my parents got together. But
and then yeah, the extra part of the story too is just the icing on the cake that really makes it like. I remember this is what makes your mom go crazy. Like
yeah, so about a year after being able to pick her out of a lineup, if you want to put it that way.
Oh, I didn't ask you. Was she still spending time with you?
Yeah. No, she was showing up
through that year still.
Yes, most definitely.
And that's when you.
Okay. It was fairly common.
Gotcha. Cool.
And you know, I kind of realized that like my parents weren't like really taking me seriously, and like, haha, that's cute and whatever, and
probably brushed it off as a simple guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then one night, Nanny just told me this really awesome story, and I can't entirely remember all the details, but what I can remember is that Nanny was living in Canada, and my mom and all of her siblings went up to visit for a summer, and like there was some woodlands around Nanny's house, and you know they were running and playing and all of these things, and my mom took a nasty fall, and she had to like kind of limp herself back home, and she was in tears, and you know it was such a beautiful day, but like she was like scared and in pain, and Nanny really took her in and like wrapped her up and made her feel comforted, and it was more from, you know, Nanny's perspective, because she was like, I felt like a superhero at that point in time for your mother, and I thought it was a really sweet story. I thought it was really cool, and that was one that particularly pertained to my mom, that I had never heard, you know, a story like that before from her.
Well, because like you said too to me, it was her and your mom.
Yeah.
Nanny and your mom. That was it. Like they're the ones who dealt with it. So.
And then the next morning, I ran to my mom, and she was like cooking breakfast, and I was like, you know, mom. And she's like, what? And I'm like, so Nanny told me a story. She's like, oh, okay. And then I, you know, regaled her with the story, and about halfway through, as she's cooking these eggs, she like drops the pan with her mouth open, and she's like, who told you that? And I'm like, I told you, Nanny told me. And she was all messed up about it. She's like, dude, no, that's real. Like, I was 11 and blah, and she told me the rest of the story. But that's when she started taking me seriously. And as just a small, prologue to this whole situation, Nanny stopped coming to me like maybe a year after that, and she left me off with a dream that I could explain to you later, but I don't want to take up the whole segment on her. But there is the last dream where I got to see her, and it was really impactful.
So 2 things I want to say real quick is, one, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, send us comments and let us know if you'd like to hear that rest of that story, and we can always do this one again. We had different plans for this, but we could always keep going on these stories and multiple things, especially because right now it's spook fucking tober. So get spooky, motherfuckers, which is kind of what helps doing this. My second thing I want to say is to the audience, you know that feeling you get when like someone tells you like not just a spooky story but a really good story, something that really hits home with you, and you're like, that's really cool, I like that. But then they tell it again for maybe someone else, like how he told me. And I think this is the second time you told me besides the podcast. I just didn't remember it the way, like, it's been a while. I think that was like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
that you told me that story. Because I remember when you were telling me, I was like, I remember this. And then this is the third time I'm hearing it. And it's like when they say it verbatim, though, and you're like, wow, no, because that's a memory that you can't just be like, you're not making it up. You're not like, oh, well, I mean, there's this and there's that kind of happened. You're leaving out this and that.
No, it's so vivid in my mind.
Yeah, and I have a good memory, and I know that like when somebody doesn't have a good memory, I'm always like, okay, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But when they like make up something for it, I'm like, kind of kills it for you. But like every time you've retold that story, it's always been the same fucking thing, and I love it, and that's why it means a lot to me. Is because one, it's the whole thing that we all would love to believe, and I know people I've met in the years where it's, my grandma used to knock on my door, and it was always 2 times and a tap. And people like after she died, I remember hearing that like do, just like so my friend Keith Brown used to tell me that
he would tingles a little bit.
He would freak out at first, and then he realized that was my grandma's knock, and it was always the last tap was her opening the door, and it was like the last final one. And there's certain things that we all have heard about with some people saying, oh, like I remember encountering my grandmother or my aunt that passed away. Those stories always move me, and because it's really nice to have. But those stories I've also noticed is one of the ones that kids can actually always recount.
Yeah, remember forever.
Yeah,
because it was real.
Well, it was real, but it was like it's a family member, someone that you loved, and it was like you could remember that feeling, and people would always take it for granted when you're in their presence. You're like, once they're gone, you remember that, and when you feel them next to you, you're like, I know that feeling anywhere.
So what's a little different
about yours.
This one, yeah, I never got to meet her, and what I chalk it up to is that, she got to see my sister when she was an itty bitty baby, and she got to, but.
And who's to say that she didn't visit Diana?
That's a really good question. I've told Diana that story before multiple times, and she's aware of it. She has a harder time coming up with these things and like coming to the surface with these things.
Well, you told me too that you guys like she's how much older than you? A few years?
About 8 years. 8
years, and so she's a little older at that point too. So I mean, you're 9, 10 years old, and she's in her teens. So it's kind of tough. It's like your nanny probably visited you before that too, and you just weren't able to like understand what was going on.
Yeah, what I think it was just she wanted to like get to know me and let me get to know her just a little bit, and I feel like that took a lot of energy for her to do,
and yet multiple times.
Yeah, and she was like clockwork. She was there, and I think that's really special because we did have a relationship, even though I never got to meet her in person. And I will always remember her. I can remember her face now. It's kind of powerful.
I always find it funny because you said this 3 times every time you tell that story too. I don't really remember the story with my mother, but you still like tell a lot, like a good chunk of it.
Well, she was very in depth with the story.
Well, and this was when you were about 9 years old. So you
no. I was about 6 when she told me that story.
Okay, so
I was 5 when I picked out the pictures, and I was 6 when I.
Oh, okay, that's right. I was thinking. Okay, yeah, it was that your mother was 11, or
my mother was 11 in the story.
Yeah, that's what I was getting confused with. But the funny thing is that was what, 23 years ago.
23 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. So for you to remember that much, though, it shows how prominent it was to like remember it, and like how you still have most of it in your head. That's amazing.
It blows my mind even still telling it. Like I have, every time I tell it, I'm like, man, that did happen, huh? Like, because it sounds crazy.
And I think that's tough too. Is for us, our listeners that don't know us, you're like, these are really cool stories. Fuck yeah.
Hopefully.
The hardest, yeah, hopefully. But the thing that's funny is the people who do listen to us and do know us, you know that we like make up all this crazy shit that like to tell a great story. But these are actually true.
Yeah, this is 100% on the level.
No joke. And that's what I wanted to bring into the next thing is, do we want to go towards aliens or do we want to stay on the idea of,
shit, man.
Because we have so many. I mean, we were up for we were talking for like 3 or 4 hours.
Yes, we were.
We were sitting in the dark. You guys have to realize it was pitch black here, and we sat on this couch that's behind us and just talked about this stuff for hours.
Yeah. Only candles and our ability to talk to each other. Okay, well, what I will say is this: I don't have a clear answer for you specifically, but I'm just gonna let you lead with the next story and see where it goes.
Okay, so I actually have a great story that I would like to see if listeners would like to hear it and not say it right now because, like you said, we can go on in a segment for so long.
Okay, how about this? We could, if we don't tell all of our stories in this one. Oh, Jesus!
So,
we have a long conversation about that one.
That one's a long story, though. It's not just a story. It's a dream mixed with reality that came out into real things. So, if you would like to hear that story, we could even put it on our Patreon or whatever.
What I think about is that let's tell another story, you and I each or so, that aren't really in depth, but then break this up into a 2-parter. And
I mean, this could be a 3 or 4-parter.
It could be. I mean,
we'll have fun. I mean, let's just have fun with it right now.
We could attack it tomorrow too.
Yeah.
You guys, we're having a conversation, but
we love you guys. This is why it's hard for us, and also again, this is our first video, and if I'm making weird looks at you guys, it's because I love you so much. But it's so hard to say because I have so much to say on that story, so I don't want to get into it. But that's my favorite story because it's not a ghost story. It's a true story that's like not a ghost. It was definitely demonic.
It's not a ghost. It's a dark being. And
it was.
We talked about like malevolent spirits and what they might actually be. This was a really long conversation.
Yeah.
But. And I saw the same girl in a completely different place.
Exactly why I don't want to get in on this is because I know that it will probably get to your story, and I would like to do that separately. So we could just do, okay, how about this? We'll make a mini-series, which is just those 2 stories for you guys for enjoyment. But right now, if we're going to do some quick stories, because we got, we're at 45. We're at 45 now.
Not bad.
And we're going to make these hour-long episodes. We love you guys, so I'm going to tell you a quick alien story.
Yes.
So I was sitting there in bed, right? This fucking alien came out with this probe this big. Sorry.
Holy shit.
I'm just kidding. Alright, let me pop my beer. So I'm going to tell this short story because I know it actually can go on with Anton's story when it comes to other worlds in the sense of UFOs or other beings. And we actually have a huge belief on them being extra-dimensional.
Yes, extra-dimensional beings.
So, I'm just going to say this, though. This one was really weird to me. I was sitting there, and I was smoking marijuana.
I thought you were gonna say meth for a second.
Oh no, never touched shit, never will. But I was smoking marijuana with my friend, and I'm saying it that way because it's funny to me. But yeah, we were sitting there smoking out of a pipe, and I know if you don't smoke weed and you think, oh, it's because you're high on drugs, go fuck yourself. It's
That's not how it works.
But we took a few hits, and then we're sitting there talking, and probably like within 20 minutes, it's probably around 7:30 by this point now. And it was during the winter time, so it was getting dark. It was dark actually pretty much by then. And we're sitting there talking, and I look over his shoulder, and I don't know why, I just looked up into the stars while I was talking. I kind of was ignoring him, kind of like, okay, yeah, talking about a girl, and we were in high school. I look up and I noticed these 3 red dots in a triangle shape. And I'm staring at them and I'm going, what the fuck? Because they're not moving, and I look up at the stars a lot, and so I'm like, that's kind of weird. I wonder if there's satellites, and I start getting my conspiracy theory brain being like, oh, I wonder if the government's doing something, maybe they're doing something up there in the space program.
How old are you again?
I believe, what's 8th grade? It was 14?
So 13, 14, okay.
Yeah, somewhere around there, but it was freshman year actually, so 14 I think.
Okay.
So I just remember it was like after 8th grade, it was during summertime, after 8th grade, graduating that, going to high school. And so I'm sitting there like, what the fuck? That's kind of crazy. Could be this, could be that. And then my mind gets away from me, and then I go, hey, Walker, do you see that? And he goes, what? And I point to the 3 dots, and they're like really perfectly, like, is it asymmetrical?
Symmetrical.
Symmetrical. Okay, so symmetrical, perfect, red dots. And we're sitting there watching them, and they're like, wow, that's kind of weird. And he agrees with me. He's like, that's kind of crazy. And they start shining a little bit brighter, and it was like, that's really weird. But we watched them for a good 5 to 10 minutes, not knowing if we should look away and keep talking. Maybe it's just our minds playing tricks on us. But then they started moving in the sense of like getting closer. Like again, they got a little bit bigger and brighter. And then within like seconds after that, they all went 3 separate ways, just at the same time. And we just lost our shit. We were like, what the fuck was that?
I really like this story.
I know, because that's a huge thing, and that's it, that's all the whole story is. It's a really short story, but I do love the idea because it's not just me. You have a story. I've talked to a few other people, and it's so funny that a few people that have talked about with the 3 red dots, I've looked into it, and there's so many different theories.
Yeah, it's always 3.
Yes.
And
well, sometimes there'll be 4.
Often in a triangle.
And there's 4 in the diamond.
There's that one.
Sorry, I didn't mean to smack the table, but there's 4 in the diamond, but that's about it.
Often in triangles, sometimes in a line, things like that.
Yeah.
But what it sounds like in that experience, it was 3 different ships.
Communicating, charging,
doing something, working together, but yeah.
My favorite part is I have someone who collaborate who had like seen the same exact thing I did, and that's always a good comfort for any of you guys who have seen the alien, like, or UFO or anything like that. You're like, you see that shit too, and they go, yeah. You're like, okay, I thought I was fucking going nuts right now.
Yeah,
now it's nice to know.
That's the thing about like my really big, like, elaborate story about seeing a UFO, which is 100% true. I promise you.
Are you gonna tell that story? Or are you gonna tell that?
No, the other one is because it's much shorter, and I did have 2 witnesses.
All right, part 2 will be the other story though, because it is a really fucking good one.
Yeah, that one fucked me up. But okay, so I had a bunch of people over at my house one year, a few years back, 4 years, I don't know, when there was a big blood moon, and and you know we were having a good time, you know, having some drinks, talking, playing music, whatever. But I had this window in my living room because we were on the upper level of a 2-story sectioned house, and you could crawl out this living room window and be out on like a roof section. And so I took myself and like 5 other people out onto the roof, and we got a clear fucking shot of the blood moon in all of its magnificent glory. It was savage as shit. It was really pretty. But as we were kind of like, you know, all gandering at it and, you know, talking and having drinks or whatever, I realized that something was moving across the sky. And you know, at first I was like, oh, okay, it's a plane. Oh, okay, it's this, whatever. But I couldn't take my eyes off of it because it looked like I don't know, a fluorescent blue-green boomerang moving at like really high speed, way the fuck up in the sky. But it didn't look metallic. It didn't look like anything I've ever seen before. And I like nudged my buddy John right next to me, and I'm like right there, and he's like, "Oh fuck!" And then our other buddy Jake was like, "Oh fuck, what the hell is that?" And John, being who John is, John Lott, and if you know him, you know him. If you don't, well, he's...
What's up, Joe?
He's an interesting fella. He's a cool dude. But he pulls out this, like, ridiculous laser pointer, and you may or may not have seen these things, but, like, they shoot, like, a big fucking, like, lightsaber laser into the sky, and it's, like, illegal to point these things at planes and shit.
Yeah, and to back you up on that, I actually know my friend Walker, who I actually mentioned in the story, he did have one of those. Fucking cost him a pretty ass penny.
Yeah, they're
those
expensive.
Things, you can fucking see them like a star almost.
Yeah, you can directly point something out in the sky.
It's crazy.
What happened was, he like followed this thing for a second, this like fluorescent boomerang in the sky, while the sky was kind of like this tinted red because of the blood moon. It was a really weird night. He hits this fucking little tiny boomerang, and you can watch the beam go up, hit the boomerang, and shoot off in another direction, which is like kind of weird, a little bit.
It's almost like a mirror technology thing. Yeah.
And then I kid you not, it's like the thinnest wisp.
Show him the camera.
The thinnest wisp
There you go.
of a cloud in the sky, and it was like from where we were looking, it couldn't have been more than an inch wide, right? And this boomerang aircraft goes behind it, and then is gone. It doesn't come out the other side. It doesn't change direction. It's just gone. Because this is just a tiny wisp of a cloud in the sky with just other scattered wisps of clouds during that night. And
I wish I remember what clouds were called, because I know Nimbus Cloud, that's the only one I fucking know.
I know it wasn't a Nimbus, because this was a bullshit little cloud.
No, I know there's a certain cloud that's called that. I wish I knew, because I've seen them, and I think everyone else has seen them too. It's very wispy. You can see through them almost.
Yeah.
As well. And so
it could barely be considered a cloud, more than just like a culmination of water vapor.
It's a shroud of water vapor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this thing goes behind it, and like the boomerang itself was barely smaller than the cloud, and then it was gone. And we were like, I looked at John, Jake looked at me, we looked at each other. We were all like, what the fuck was that? And there's no doubt in my mind. We've talked about it multiple times since then. We saw a goddamn UFO.
And remember, people, UFO, of course, you can classify as unidentified flying object. But honestly, you know, with hearing that story, mine can be like, you know, something out there that I just couldn't explain. Still UFO.
Oh, yours is pretty exceptional.
And that's what I'm saying though. It's still with like yours. It's like those are still really weird anomalies that aren't just like, I don't know, like 3 red dots, and that's actually, you can look it up in Google. There's so many reports.
There are
the red
so
triangles,
many.
the red dots, and lines like we described. Never heard about the boomerang, which I really love about that. So it seemed like it was an actual ship, maybe having malfunctions,
Like,
and got back going or something.
yeah, and like if you've ever seen like opal, like you know
Yeah.
how pretty opal is.
It is very pretty. Morgan's favorite stone.
Yeah, it was my mom's too. But that's the color it was giving off. It was like translucent but very opaline.
Had like some depth to it though.
Yeah, like you could tell that it had
They're
curvature.
shiny. They're not like quartz where you see through them. It's like you can actually see that, like it's there.
You could it was translucent to a degree, like where it didn't seem like it was totally solid, but you could see curvature in it, even though it was way the fuck up in the sky. And I'll never forget that. But that does not shine a candle to my other story, and I'm sorry we can't do that in this one.
We can't do our other stories. You know, I got my okay, we'll say malevolent spirit that I had to deal with.
I've got another malevolent spirit to talk about.
And then you've got I've got actually two other one other encounter that actually I can say proudly that I believe it is an encounter with the extraterrestrial, not actual them, just UFOs, we like to say it that way, but weird anomalies in the sky. And then I know you want to say your other story, so part 2, you guys.
We're gonna have to break it down. I'm sorry, like we've been having a little too much fun actually getting into the details, and I hope that
It's hard not to. We do this all the time, so
Yeah.
it's hard not to like. But we hope you guys appreciate the details too, because
yes,
you need that, don't you? Like to make it believable. And it's not like we're trying to fake it out. It's just like when you've had those experiences yourself, you will know what we're trying to say, because it's like everything's playing in a movie reel in your head. Like I need to say that. That's why sometimes you're like, I need to back up a little bit and go, yo, this was very important. By the way,
yeah, that's why we tell stories. It's
Mhm.
like, you know, you can give the basic outline of some shit, and people will go, oh, that sounds interesting or whatever. But when you really flush it out and tell them what happened, that's when it gets a little more like, oh fuck.
And that's why we love storytellers. But this whole episode and second part, true stories.
That's 100%, 100% true.
And I will say this: next time you guys come and check us out for when we get this episode uploaded and all that, and you know you come for part 2 if it's up and ready, might be for another week, sadly. But grab a beer, sit down,
Yeah,
and
have
enjoy
one
this
with us. You know what? Hold on, I'm just gonna bust this one
But
open.
yeah, you know what? Smoke a joint, drink a beer with us, because
Yeah.
now we're on video, and we want to
Yeah,
say you guys, we love you guys so much, and we're